This video is actually so exciting to make because who doesn't like a completely useless advice? And I'm pretty sure you heard a lot of advice in your life, and some of them didn't make sense. Some of them, maybe after years, you realized how wrong they are. So today I'm going to be talking about a few advice that I've learned that they are just stupid, and you should definitely not follow these pieces of advice. So let's talk about these and let's stop this cycle of believing in those advice. And for anyone new here, I'm Justina. I'm an occupational psychologist and empowerment coach, and I'm interested in anything and everything related to psychology, neuroscience, research, health optimization, not only your mental health but physical health. So the first advice from the basket, called advice not to follow, is definitely my favorite. Think realistically. Or isn't it too ambitious? This is definitely the advice that I've heard multiple times from my grandparents, especially my grandfather. And I believe that it is just a very old-fashioned, sometimes closed-minded thinking. Because what does it mean that something is realistic or something isn't? Your reality is extremely subjective. So whatever is realistic for you might not be realistic for others. Whatever is realistic for others might not be realistic for you. It's all based on your subjective opinion and perspective. And when somebody is telling you, isn't it too ambitious? Or I don't think this is realistic, they kind of try to say that you will fail, that there is no way that you're succeeding, and they try to put you down before you start. And maybe they try to protect you from the failure or disappointment. But who knows if you're going to succeed or if you're going to fail. The greatest discoveries, these were the ideas nobody thought they are going to be possible. Nobody thought they're going to be realistic. How many times J.K. Rowling was rejected by publishers before she actually published her Harry Potter book, and it became a huge hit, even though people didn't believe in her. Probably a lot of people were telling her that it's just not realistic and it's not going to sell. And just because somebody feels this way doesn't mean that it's the absolute truth. That's why I believe that this advice is just stupid as hell, because just because somebody feels like it's a stupid or too ambitious idea doesn't mean that it's going to fail. Doesn't mean that it's not going to be a great success and you're going to make it. The next advice, it's also very common, is that love is hard. And love isn't hard. Love is emotion, one of many of human beings. And for example, the bond between a child and the mother or child and the father, called love, is often a very automatic feeling. Your body just releases a lot of hormones like oxytocin, the bonding hormone, and then you just feel like they are so close to you and you love them. So love as of love is not hard, and loving someone, opening up to someone and creating that strength and that strong bond when you are okay with giving yourself and other things to another person because this is your safe space and they do the same, it's often done effortlessly if you find a right person. And the problem with belief that love is hard is that it's not about love. It's about that relationships or friendships do require work. They are not necessarily hard, but they are not necessarily effortless, like the emotion that those relationships or those friendships create. And especially nowadays, when the world is all about cheating, about all the open relationships or ghosting people, treating them like just a number, easily replaceable, or maybe because somebody was hurt in the past, they have unconsciously certain traumas or pattern of behaviors, and then it's much harder for them to create a loving space for another human being. That kind of things create that love very hard. But it's not about the love as emotions, it's more about relationships, that they do take work, that they do take effort to consciously get to know yourself, your attachment style, your love language, which might not be the same as your partner's or your friends. And it also does require you to consciously get to know another person. What's the reason they behave this way? What triggers them? What fears they have? What they love to do? What is their love language and how they see their relationships? It's all about getting to know another person. So then this love can be effortless. Before, I believe that people were just talking more. Things were more obvious because we didn't have that many choices. So we wanted to be an open book to another person. Nowadays, we just complicate everything. We have our trust issues, we are closed, and then we spend so much time on social media and we have very high expectations. And then we don't feel comfortable with sharing with another person, or maybe that person is not really that understanding. Before, people really needed to make it work. Now it's just easier to run away. That's why this love seems hard when it isn't. It just does require work. Because they develop, you develop, world develops. And you need to make sure that you're curious about each other so then you can develop together in the same direction. The third advice is definitely a very cute one, which says that you should follow your heart. And we hear it quite a lot. And it is cute to follow your heart. Do what your heart wants. Do something what you love. Do things which you feel like they are right for you. And it does work sometimes. And I do feel like it's a good approach in certain aspects. But we have our mind for a reason. And just because you feel like you should follow your heart doesn't mean that your heart knows what it wants. And let me explain, because you assume that your heart knows the best. But whatever your heart is triggered by is by hormones, by maybe seeking a dopamine rush. So you'd be eating cookies instead of eating boring lettuce. Doesn't mean that it's a smart choice. Doesn't mean that it's helping you. No, but you follow your heart because you feel like you should be eating that cookies. And don't get me wrong, I believe that you need to feed your heart or your soul from time to time, but also feed your body and your mind. So your heart cannot always win, because those decisions might not be the best for you in reality. So when you allow yourself to follow on your heart, you're relying a lot on your emotions. And your emotions are extremely valid, but they are caused by, of course, you, but by certain schemes or certain patterns of behaviors that happened in your life. Sometimes maybe it is your defense mechanism. Doesn't mean that it's a good one, like self-sabotage. It might be a system to protect you. Is it a good one? Not necessarily. Perhaps you're ghosting someone because you're afraid of commitment, or you're afraid that they're going to hurt you. Is it a good system? Not really, because you're avoiding something and you don't have a chance to repair your beliefs or to overcome your limiting beliefs, because the only confirmation you have is the ones that something did hurt you. So just following the heart is really not an option. It's really not a good advice to let yourself to be controlled by emotions. That's why we have a thinking mind. That's why we have rational thinking, logical thinking. We want to develop that logical reasoning to later on understand where those emotions are coming from, whether they're helpful or not, and how to improve them. If you keep on feeling all the time betrayed, this is coming from somewhere and it is a valid emotion, but perhaps there is something there that maybe is oversensitive because of something. We want to improve it. We want to maybe let know another person how they can help you fix the things. So then you are much happier, less reactive, and perhaps you overcome those limiting beliefs and you will function a little bit better and think a little bit more rationally rather than just be influenced by emotions that can be so changeable. Another advice, which is my favorite, although I think that I'm saying that is my favorite with every single advice, but this advice is that you should have it all figured out by a certain age or just in general. And I really thought that the moment I'm 20 or the moment I'm 25, I will have it all figured out. I will be finally an adult. And you know what? Right now I'm 25 and I think I realize that I will never have it all figured out. Because the thing is that we only live once. This game of life, nobody knows the rules. You've never lived before. You've never lived this life, although people who believe in the reincarnation, maybe they think differently. But generally, you learn as you go. So even if you were learning at school for 10-15 years, you have no idea how adult life works. When you're 25, this is the first time you are 25. When you're 30, this is the first time you're 30. When you go to this job, this is the first time you're doing this job. When you're leaving this particular day, this is the first time you live this particular day. So how the hell you're supposed to have it all figured out? People who seem like, oh, they have their shit together, definitely they just fake it until they make it, or they try until they succeed. They do what they best can and they roll as they go. So that's why it's so important to not be afraid of failures and understand that this is a part of the journey. How the hell you're supposed to succeed in everything that you're doing if this is the first time that you're freaking a beginner in every single aspect at the beginning. And you might be thinking that successful people never failed, but they definitely failed more times than you think, because they also tried multiple different things more than you think. But of course we don't see it, or maybe we often don't want to focus on that part because we focus on whatever we want to focus. So when we see successful people, we see their success, and that's it. Behind every success there is a lot of failures. There is a saying that a winner is a loser who tried one more time. And I think that this is so true. So when you think that you should have it all figured out, well, you're definitely wrong, and I don't think you will ever have everything all figured out. This is just a false belief that we have control over our life and our future. And the only thing certain in our life is uncertainty. So you might feel like you have control over your life, and you do have control over a lot of aspects of it. But to predict the future, well, maybe in some aspects, but not all of them, because there is few aspects that you can't really control, like other people's behavior, other people's intentions, or their thoughts, or what they do that interacts with you. Another advice or maybe belief is that therapy or coaching is for people who struggle with mental health. And we need to debunk this belief, this myth, because during the therapy or during coaching, this is the moment when you're increasing your self-awareness. Okay, you do sometimes try to process your traumas or some big events of your life, but most of the time this is basically a time for you to stop and reflect and really get to know yourself, or really analyze your life. Why am I the way I am? Usually people have a lot of imprinted behaviors from childhood. That might be some triggers or stressors or traumas, but that might be just simple experiences expectation. But for example, my father was this way, that's why I expect my husband to behave this way as well. And if he doesn't, then I don't feel safe, because that's the definition of love for me. So therapy or coaching is really for people who want to function better, for people who really want to understand the bigger picture and understand why certain things are the way they are, or why your emotions are those emotions particularly. Why in this moment you feel sad instead of being happy. This is basically your space to increase your self-awareness, to encourage your reflection and get to know yourself and the relationships you can create and you have with other people. It is the process to learn how to function better than you thought it is possible. It is the process for you to start thriving in your life and with other people, and in the specific environment that will allow you to thrive instead of just keep on surviving. Then another advice that I really used to believe for many years is that you should be humble. And this comes from the way that we were raised to be a good person, to be a good girl, to just fit in with others. And I get it. We go to school and we compare ourselves to other people. We are assessed by the same scale in certain subjects. So we do compare ourselves. We do try to fit in. We want to feel that we belong. And this is one of the most basic instincts, the feeling of belongingness. So we are taught to fit into the box, to not to be too confident, not to boast too much about something, because then we're not going to fit in. We're going to believe that we are better than others. But when people are beating themselves up for something, that's okay, right? If somebody is harsh on themselves, which by the way, a lot of people is really harsh on themselves and they really don't treat themselves as a best friend, more as a super demanding teacher or a torturer, probably, sometimes even punishing themselves for the behavior they created themselves, and then they do it again and then they feel bad and then they do it again and they are in this vicious cycle. But the moment when somebody is just too confident, finally discovering their full potential, feeling their best, and they really believe in themselves, people don't like that. People feel like, oh no, that person realized that they are better than them, and they try to destroy that growth. They try to stop them from moving on. So nowadays I really hate that advice, because I believe that everyone should be proud of their achievements, no matter how big or small they are. They should have a high self-belief and high self-esteem, because why not? If you are a confident person, doesn't mean that you have to put other people down or feel like they are better than others. That means that you believe that you are good enough and you can do whatever you want to do in your life. And I think that's the essence of life, to be happy with your own life. So being too confident or not humble doesn't hijack that. Doesn't mean that you will have to destroy people on the way because you feel better than others. But those people probably fearing that because they don't want to be reminded that they are not doing anything with their lives. They are not growing, and they probably liked you better when you were trying to fit in with them. And that advice is also connected with another advice that says that you should be a good person, a good girl. And again, it's usually because of the way that we were raised. We believe that we need to put other people's first, but then it leads to over-sacrificing, people-pleasing, never expressing what you want or how you feel, because other people are first. And then you never put yourself first. You're holding a lot of emotions. You're suppressing what you think, what you feel, what you want to do. And then you're losing yourself. And then unfortunately, as study shows, that backfires on you and you get sick because your body has to hold on to everything which you were accumulating there. And then your immunity system, unfortunately, is overloaded because it cannot defend you from you. And this is something what actually happens a lot of the times whenever we are burnout, but we still keep on pushing with our work or with our other responsibilities. Sooner or later you will fall sick and your body will make you stop. Because if you don't listen to yourself, your body will decide for you. So that's why putting yourself first is not selfish, because the moment you start taking care of yourself and your needs, you can show up as the best version of yourself to others. And I bet that they want to see you happy. They want to see you in the best shape possible, mental and physical. And that will make them happy because you will be able to give them as much as they need, instead of you sacrificing yourself for others constantly, and one day it's going to be just too much for you and they will have to take care of you because you will have no resources to give. So it just makes sense to put yourself first, so then they can see and get the best version of yourself possible. Then another advice is that you should take your time to discover what you like and find yourself. And I don't like this advice because you don't need time. What do you need time for? This is such a precious resource. And then what are you trying to discover exactly? The thing about you and your self-identity is that you create your own identity. So you don't need time or finding something. You need to reflect who you want to be. Then you need to strategize how to make it work. And then you just execute. Go towards this goal and actively work towards this goal. Another advice is quite obvious, that you should have a lot of friends or a big social circle. And actually, the older you get, the less friends you have, for obvious reasons. For example, we don't go to school anymore, so we are not exposed to so many peers. But also later on, people just focus on their own stuff or create their own families. And they hang out in smaller circles because it's just hard to organize everything at the same time. So then it works for everyone. And as much as people are sociable creatures and we really need this social contact, so we need friends and family and neighbors, we don't need a lot of people. We need high quality relationships or friendships. We don't want quantity of whatever toxic friends around. So the older you get, the more you realize that there is no point of having so many friends or keeping certain people in your circle because it's just too much effort, for example, or you're just going separate ways and then you're choosing quality over quantity. You prioritize your peace and support and you choose wisely. Who do you want to keep in your inner circle? And you also establish boundaries. You understand what you find respectful and disrespectful, which relationships align with your goals and your beliefs, and then you make a decision which ones are worth keeping. For example, if you are at this stage that you don't like drinking, but all your friends are drinking and they're forcing you every single time to drink with them, perhaps this is the time to let them go because they don't value and they don't respect your life choices or your lifestyle choices. Next advice really pisses me off because this is the belief that you should chase happiness. And life is not about happiness. Life is about living your life with purpose and creating that purpose for you. And you can't really have happiness without those bad days and failures. And if you're just trying to chase happiness and pleasure and everything what brings you just good vibes, then you're going to be extremely limited. But after some time, this happiness is not going to feel that happy because people adapt so quickly. This is one of the reasons why extremely rich people that can have everything go for some crazy adventures, or they don't mind risking their life because they want to feel something, because they are so used to getting everything what they want that this is their norm and they need a little bit more feelings of something to disturb that norm. That's why bad days not only teach you so much, but also encourage you to develop gratitude to whatever you have. It encourages you to develop also strength for life and notice other things. Not only limit yourself to happiness. That's like super closed-minded and impossible to get long-term. Another advice that might seem like a logical advice, but it's actually quite bad advice that you should not follow, is that you should treat other people like you want to be treated. And it's nice in terms of like, if I respect others, I want others to respect me. The problem is that you define respect, you define love totally differently than other people. So for example, if your love language is acts of service and the other person's love language is touch, you keep on doing things for another person, they might not feel loved because their love language is touch and you've not been hugging them for a while. So you might not understand why they don't feel loved, even though you keep on giving them love in your definition. And the same with respect or kindness or help or anything. Everything is defined differently by other people. So if you really want to treat them right, you should ask them. You should get to know what their definition is, what their values are, what their preferences are, so then you can really give it to them the way they will understand. And the same they have to do towards you. So then you can actually treat each other however you're treating each other. Next advice is so popular and so common, and it is that time will heal everything. We hear, or I hear, so often someone saying, just give it a time, think about it, sleep on it. And while sleeping on it actually makes sense, because the moment you sleep, then you're analyzing your day, and then in the morning you might have actually an answer and you're distancing yourself from whatever happened the day before. When people say that time will heal everything, it's a little bit of a passive approach, saying that you don't have to do anything about the situation, because you just need to wait. And then what you're doing, you're just sitting there thinking that you have no control over the situation and you should just give it a time, and you keep on waiting. And waiting is just a distraction, because it doesn't solve anything, because time doesn't heal anything. Distance does. Your emotional distance does. And to emotionally distance yourself from the situation, you need to work on it actively. You need to educate yourself what really happened, how it affected you, how do you feel about it, and come up with the process that will help you to heal actually. And that involves processing your emotions, undoing your triggers, or opening your limiting beliefs. And once you're actively working on it and you're growing and developing yourself and increasing your self-awareness of whatever is happening and how it affects you, this is the moment when you're healing. And it does take time, of course. This process does take time, but essentially time itself doesn't heal anything. And you might see in the cases that somebody just suppress some kind of emotion or some kind of memory over the years, and the moment it is triggered, it feels like nothing changed. And definitely I suppressed a lot of emotions or memories from my childhood for whatever reason, but I didn't want to work on it and I didn't want to process it, and I thought that is irrelevant. And now I see sometimes, however, this kind of behavior is still triggered within me unconsciously, because time didn't change anything. I didn't process it, so it is still there. Until I process it, I'm not going to be healed. And then almost the last advice is that you should follow others, and that will bring you happiness. And I think that this advice is very common in old generation, because they believe that this feeling of safety will bring you happiness, and if everyone is doing it, then maybe they are right. This majority of people, they should be knowing better, right? It's all about democracy, so if the majority is doing that, then this is the right decision. And unfortunately, just because it might be a safe option doesn't mean that this is for you, And it doesn't mean that it's going to bring you happiness. Because as we know, comfort zone is usually very comfortable, but not really fulfilling or satisfying for a long time. So actually people who risk more or do whatever they feel like they should be doing and that's beneficial for them, even though it might not be an easy thing because you might be going against everyone, that brings more fulfillment and satisfaction because you're choosing a personalized approach especially for you. And as we know, everyone is unique. And then the final advice is don't worry, be happy. And that's probably the worst advice because okay, of course we want to be happy, we want to be satisfied and you want to be fulfilled, but then if you don't worry, then you might be consciously ignore all the danger, all the things that might go wrong, and that is extremely dangerous for you because you're just choosing not to see it. And we need some kind of level of worrying because maybe we care, maybe it's an indication that something is wrong, but we need that kind of level of indication to keep ourselves in check. But it all depends on the level. So we want to have this low, healthy level of worrying. For example, when you're crossing the street, if you just believe that you should not worry and just be happy, then there is a high chance that one day you're going to be driven over because you didn't worry and you didn't even want to think about possible danger. But then on the other side, if you keep on obsessing that you're going to be driven over, then you might never cross the street and you will never get anywhere because you will never cross the street. So we need a healthy level of worrying. So advice, don't worry, be happy, is useless and probably dangerous. And that's everything for today. Let me know in the comments down below what advice you like the most and maybe what advice you heard that you thought that it's basically useless or harmful or actually very beneficial for you. Share your thoughts because I'm curious about this advice and maybe it's going to help more people. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel not to miss my next video about tips how to optimize your overall well-being. And I'll see you in the next video.